Ooh.
Hey everyone, welcome. Pleasure to have you guys all here. We got a really great panel to talk about a pretty specific and interesting kind of topic today. We'll give people a few minutes to kind of flow into the room. But if you're here and you want to let us know where you're coming from, um, shoot us a message in the chat. Normally on these revenue management roundtables, I don't pay too much attention to questions, but this is going to be kind of like a niche conversation. So please feel free to ask them and we'll bring them up with the group. Um, Pretty excited today to kind of chat with you guys about this. So we'll give people well, actually, let's just go straight into introductions. People can flow in while we're doing introductions. This is being recorded. We will have it up on the Wheelhouse YouTube before the end of the week. And if you don't know me, my name is John DeRelay. I'm the head of revenue management education here at Wheelhouse. Been with the team about 5 years, get to work with clients all over the world. And then prior to that, I spent almost a decade as revenue manager, head of revenue management at Stay Alfred. So a lot of experience in the space. And we've got a great panel. So why don't we start with you, Kyle? Do you want to introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, where you're from, who you're working with, and maybe a little bit just touch on your kind of like experience around like thinking about the World Cup as well.
Yeah, absolutely glad to be here again, John. Yeah, my name's Kyle Plenski. I've been in the short-term rental space for about, it's gonna be 10 years officially next year, which I'm really excited about. Kind of worked all sides of it, started off on the guest side operations, moved through kind of integrations. Got a lot of exposure. I was working with Vacasa at the time, right there in that massive growth sphere. But for the last couple, about 5 years, I've been focused on rates and revenue across the entire country, at just a ton of different markets, gotten a really good spread. I'm specifically with Pacer Revenue now, just continuing that US focus with a little bit of international as well. So glad to be joining these meetings, and of course, with this being a Con US World Cup, I'm really excited that I've got several different clients that are all within these markets. I'm really glad that we got a lot of games to work with and a lot of special dates that we can talk about today. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Bartjan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Perfect. So my name is Bartjan. Americans usually say Bart because it's a bit easier to pronounce. So I'm from Europe. I'm from Belgium. So in a different time zone than the majority of you. I'm the founder of Optimizer. So we're a company specialized in OTA optimization, and we connect that with revenue management because we strongly believe that OTA optimization or distribution as such is an essential part of the revenue strategy. So hi everyone.
We had to make sure to get a European revenue manager who knows more about soccer than most Americans. So, or football, sorry.
Football,
Um,
buddy.
yeah. Case in point. Rebecca, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rebecca. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Revenue Research. We are a revenue management consultant firm. We've got clients all over the world that we help with everything from full service revenue management to just simply consulting, someone to um, be a therapist on a weekly basis or help kind of teach and strategize for clients. So, been in the industry about 10 years. Um, yeah, very excited to be here. I love everything event pricing. JDR and I like to kind of bounce ideas off of each other when we've got interesting things, whether it's sports or music. It's definitely one of my favorite things to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. And Henry.
Hi, my name's Henry. I started in this industry a little over 8 years ago on the property management side. Since then, I broke off and I founded RevUp Rental. We provide revenue management services for property managers across the nation and in Canada as well. So, Barjan, if you need a place for the Belgium game in Vancouver, I'm your guy. Hit me up. But no, I'm happy to be on this. Happy to talk shop with you guys on this. It's definitely going to be an interesting one.
That's a
Awesome.
deal.
Well, pleasure to have you guys all here. I'll do just a very, very brief framing, and then we're going to dive into some conversations about strategy. This event is really, really fascinating to me because, one, big event strategy is always kind of a unique thing. So I'm sure we all have some interesting experience or ideas around that in general. But this is a very particular kind of event, and I think it's probably one of the most novel things that revenue managers are going to have to deal with right now. The main thing being it is worldwide, it's an international event, it's across a number of markets, and there's a lot of inconsistency in both like dates and like who's going to be coming where and where things are playing. So for revenue managers, I think there is really no silver bullet. So the goal is just to kind of talk about what's on people's minds, how they're thinking about the risk, what they're trying to consider so that you guys can think about that too. And if you aren't in a market where there is World Cup, I think this will be valuable just in terms of thinking about large event strategy because you only get a few chances to do that in your career sometimes. And so there's not a lot of like opportunities to gain experience from it. Now, in terms of just some of the brief framing I wanted to do, I do have a few pictures here. I think the main thing to do is really talk a little bit about the schedule. And also just kind of remind people that, you know, in terms of how novel this event was, last year this event was in Qatar. So pretty much all of the games were played in Qatar across four cities, Al Khor, Doha, Al Rayyan, and Al Wakra. And that means that like the experiences people had pricing there are going to be very different because all of those areas were very consolidated. All the games were played in the same place. The travelers could go to one country and see all the games that they wanted to see. This year, we have games across how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 cities and three countries. And all of these countries have not held a World Cup in a very long time, if at all. The last one in the US was 1994. So we're probably not going to go to key data and ask what was going on in 1994. In Mexico, it was 1986, and Canada has never held World Cup games. So it's a pretty novel situation in terms of both timing and the fact that this organization being in a bunch of different cities is very fascinating. The time frame is also pretty long too. So this first image is showing us the beginning of the group stage. So it's basically from mid-June to end of June. I'll post these pictures when we upload the thing so you can access them. It is showing us kind of where the games are being played. You can see they're kind of all over the map. Some of them are at the same time, some of them aren't. But there's additional stuff as well. Unfortunately, I can't find a better picture than this. This is FIFA's picture of how they're planning for the dates in the finals and quarterfinals and semifinals. Hard to find a better resolution one, but we can see that these games are going to be all over the place, but then they really condense down into a few markets as we get towards the end. And so for the revenue managers here, one, we have to think about like what kind of guests are going to be coming to these games? How many games are guests going to go to? What games are going to be the highest impact? How are we going to deal with these games that we don't know who's playing in them yet? And there's a lot of really fascinating stuff, I think, to talk about. So let's just kind of start it out. I'll turn it over to the panelists, but you know, let's talk a little bit about like what do you think your biggest strategic considerations are right now? If it's for a specific market, and how are you thinking is going to be best for you to approach it at this time? And why don't we go ahead and start with you, Rebecca?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I have a client who is in New York, and their inventory is larger. They are already kind of a unique situation with a lot of the regulations and things like that. I think we are seeing that play out in a lot of other areas too, just with our vacation rentals allowed in that area. And if they are they grandfathered in? How far are they away from the stadium? Easy stuff like that. So I kind of had a different approach. What I also do a lot of times with different events is I am a firm believer in shorter length of stay, higher ADR. I think that if you're playing the search algorithm, I think, especially if you have time as your advantage, that is something that I've seen be very successful. Not only thinking about just the nightly revenue, but thinking about the business as a whole. What is my extra revenue in upsells, fees, turns, all of that stuff. So if I can get more reservations in a shorter, stays, that is kind of my play. Obviously, I think if I had smaller inventory, more of your one bedroom studios that were competing head to head with hotels, I might have a different strategy. Right now, I'm holding higher, have gotten some really good bookings, really strong bookings for those larger properties because there's not a lot out there. So with New York also having the finals, I have a lot of time to kind of hold. And what we've gotten so far has been really good. Um, so I've got a kind of a unique one this time. But I have also been on the other side of it, where it's been really tough. So that's kind of where my angle is now. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few days now that they've lowered the prices of tickets. I don't know if you guys have kind of, I see Kyle's face like, I don't know. Is that going to change? Is that really going to move the needle? But it'll be interesting to see if we see any more pickup from that. I think that there is something to be said there with kind of the backlash that's already kind of been online about ticket prices. I don't know. This one's an interesting one.
That's an interesting point because, looking at a lot of the market data, and we'll probably get into this as we go a little deeper about like what even do we expect for the booking window given how like who is the traveler. But a lot of these markets are not seeing differences in pacing yet.
No.
We're not seeing spikes. It's not like Taylor Swift, where as soon as it's announced, it's sold out. So revenue managers are really having to guess when this demand is going to come in. And the ticket price is kind of an interesting one because that's kind of that's a leading indicator for us. That's an indicator from another org about what's going on in their kind of demand metrics, right? So let's kind of, I appreciate you giving us that feedback, Rebecca. Kyle, why don't you give us a little survey about what you've been thinking about strategy
Yeah.
wise approach?
Well, I can definitely lead off from where you're going with Rebecca with the pricing, because that is something that I've been obsessed about. I think, kind of spoilers jumping ahead in my brain right here, I think we're going to really see some true movement in terms of bookings after January 11th. That's basically when the current round of randomized ticket selection is ending. That's also when those $60 tickets are ending, which the reason why I was kind of, not to be negative about that,
No.
but when you do the math, it's 10% of the tickets go to each qualified team. Sorry, they're doing 10% of the qualified tickets for each team is going to be at that level. It comes out to like 0.8% of the total tickets sold. It's a
Mhm.
shot in the bucket in terms of the
Mhm.
total like cost of guests are going to be. What I'm just really seeing across the board, and it really does seem to be compared to the pricing that was in Qatar, FIFA is going for exorbitantly higher prices just because of the domestic US location. They know people are one, here willing to spend the money because it's localized, and two, international travelers love to come to the United States. Now, whether or not our current president will allow them in is a whole different thing. That's one of the risks that I'm actually very aware of. Is we've already seen travel bans recently announced. They're mostly affecting African nations, so that is the sort of thing where this has been mostly European style event. We haven't seen that affected just yet, but you don't know what this president that likes to have a lot of attention on what he's going to do in the next year. We don't know. But in terms of stuff that I'm focused on, I think we're really going to see a turnaround after January 11th, again, when that round ends and it just goes to open pricing. One of the things I'm also really fascinated about with the multi-city location is we have this really unique opportunity where we'll have demand actually between the games. I think is going to be a factor. I've noticed a good amount of longer stay reservations have come in where, situations where I thought, oh, they're just going to book for the US game and then it's going to be a 2 to 3 day stay and that's where we're going to get our peak pricing. I've actually had good success with 5 to 6 day reservations where guests will get potentially two games in that same town. A lot of these gaps are between 2 and 5 nights between games that are in the same exact city. So there is a chance for those high value, high paying guests to be like, well, I'm already going to pay through the nose for one game. I'm going to pay for two if I can possibly get it and see four different teams, especially in the group stage matches. So I think that's definitely been something that's kind of a unique opportunity. Whereas compared to a Taylor Swift, there was only that one off that happens. Suddenly now you actually have multi offs within the same town. And that's not even getting to my last factor here, which is the fact that World Cup is playing every day. And as we all know, this is an international event where, regardless of the time zone, you are in a pub, you are in a tent, you are watching games, you're watching teams you never even thought about watching just because you're excited to be celebrating a very international sport. So I think what's really great too for these longer stay guests, and the reason why I think we can really focus on them as a short-term rental industry, is the fact that, like, yes, the game might be locally on a Monday and the next one might not be until Thursday, but for all the days in between, the fans who flew into town for those games are going out to pubs within that same town. So it's going to bring a real strong international flair, in my mind at least, or my predictions, to that localized environment. So I think it's going to be, especially for people who live outside of the city cores, they're going to want to be within the city to see these international visitors, to be connecting with them all on a very sweet level. So those are just kind of some of the initial things I'm looking at. And I think if I had to add one last little factor, I think this is really nice. I've worked multiple eclipses, one-off events where, you have one specific day, you either get it or you miss it. What's really awesome with these games is, Rebecca, what you've talking about with New York, I think that's definitely still an eclipse. The average ticket price is in the thousands of dollars for that game. So that is definitely going to be high demand. But for the rest of us, we actually have room to test out the threshold. You can get a group stage game, and you might book it only maybe 15 to 20% above what you actually thought could get. That's great. You still have remaining games to get additional value out of. So I think it's really nice for us as revenue managers. We have multiple opportunities to get it correct, which I think is awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very exciting too, especially anticipating like how as the event goes on, you might incorporate what you learn, but also like the how the demand itself might
Mm.
change, especially if locals are like, hey, let's go into the city, like drive-in markets, things like that. People who aren't thinking about it now, but watch a few
Mm.
games in their local bar, like, let's just go down and be in
Yep.
the city.
Yep.
Fascinating. Um, Henry, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about this and what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'll feed off both of those. There's good points from both of you guys. But yeah, no, I was kind of with my markets and my clients, they wanted to just shoot prices extremely high. One of my clients, the one in Vancouver, they're not even opening their calendars until after that January 11th. So we're waiting until that to kind of see how the market like picks up. I think personally, longer length of stays earlier on are going to be a big ticket item, especially for like Rebecca. I have units in New York, but they're those 1, 2 bedrooms. So it's like I'm looking at hotels, seeing what they're pricing at and everything along those lines. But I'm thinking like people are coming here from different countries. They're probably going to stay for a little bit longer. So utilizing the length of stay discounts, perceiving the value, and then also just capitalizing on like that plus like along that price. As dates get close, like there's one game on a Saturday in New York, I want to say that one is probably going to be like, last minute, a lot of like weekend travelers for sure. But up front, it's interesting. Do you have a specific cancellation policy for those, or did you pivot those, or is
Henry, I can't give everything away.
oh,
No, I'm just kidding. So we
wow.
yeah, they're sticking with their normal 30-day cancellation. We're watching it really, really tight. And that's what anytime these big events get announced and you get a really good booking, I think as revenue managers, yes, you like are happy, but you're also then anxious for like the next, 75 days until that guest like officially checks in and it's real. Um, and the
Yeah.
owner state, like I think there is that sense because that's what I was really worried about, honestly. Um, back in, the draw day, I was like, oh my gosh, if we get inundated with reservations and then they cancel, like what are we gonna do? And we didn't see that, which I was very happy and very glad that that didn't happen. But we are, making kind of sticking to that stricter cancellation policy for the larger homes. I'm
Yeah.
not as worried because I think, especially given where their location is and that they sleep 12 to 16, it's a unique beast. There's not a lot of inventory there that I think we could fill it if that, happens. I mean, it's I definitely think that's something that everyone needs to think about is what happens with those cancellations.
Yeah, we when I was working the Super Bowl out here in Scottsdale, we had like an $80,000 booking for 5 days for like a 1.9 million house, and they could cancel 2 days before for a full refund.
No,
On that. I was meeting with our team constantly, and I was like, give them free early check-in, free late checkout, ask if they want groceries, and it was fine. But no, I had anxiety behind it. But it is interesting because I'm worried a little bit too that people are going to book, wait to see if like they can actually make the trip and then possibly cancel. So it
Um,
is interesting to see what the market picks up to. I've been noticing in different data sources the lower end of like prices per like asset type quality have been the ones getting booked on average, at least from what I've seen. And so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, no, shooting for those longer length of stays, I think a lot of like early, farther out bookers are going to be coming for that longer period. So trying to capitalize on that with the discounting, just to kind of like get a good base in. And then, yeah, we'll see how the market kind of picks up. And no, we don't know what's going to happen, in the new year. Anything could happen. So, yeah, that's kind of my outlook right now, a little holistic view, you could say.
Henry, move a little closer to your mic.
Oh,
Not a big
hello.
thing. We're good. We can hear you. But it is, so small tip here, just so you guys know, this is a tip from Jug Truitt at V-Trips. You can, on Booking.com, request that specific dates have a different cancellation policy. It is a hassle. You have to go through your rep to do it, but you can set dates to have a different cancellation policy if that's something you're considering. I think it's also kind of interesting, the cancellation policy is something you can consider. What I've noticed in particularly Super Bowls, the last few Super Bowls, not so much like Taylor Swift because that's such a crazy sellout event, but Super Bowls, US markets have had vacancy, and especially in our space, people tend to overprice. And if you are really shooting for the moon on price, you have to be considering your cancellation policy, because if the market ends up having vacancy, you could see turn and then really not be able to capture a great rate. So it's something to really consider, especially I think given that for American revenue managers in particular, or revenue property managers, people do tend to overshoot on price, especially early. And if you have those looser cancellation policies, you may lose that revenue. Bart-Jan, why don't you tell us what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think if I look at it like from a macro level, this is a very unique event in the sense that, and you guys have said it, there are a lot of different host cities, three different countries, and there hasn't been an event of this magnitude. We had the World Cup in Qatar, then in Russia, then in Brazil, then in South Africa. All of them, it's very easy to track. Okay, what was the impact on price? It was 100% more, 120%. It's very easy to track. But right now, because of that, everything is in all these different areas. It's very hard to grasp. You have Mexico, you have Canada, you have the US, all different regulations, all different travel restrictions to make it actually hard. What we have been seeing, and that's actually just taking a step also back to some macroeconomics, the best paying countries will be the richest countries. We have to be completely honest there. If you have Netherlands against Japan in your city, that's going to generate a lot of travel, because the Netherlands and Japan both are very high on the GDP per capita. So that's going well. So I think it's first starting, okay, who's actually coming to town? But then also being realistic, it's the World Cup. All of the previous World Cup, almost all tickets have always been sold out. So you will have demand. It's just whether it's crazy demand in the sense that Dutch people who are spending whatever their whole kidney to stay at a place, or people who will wait a bit longer before prices drop. So I think to properly analyze it, it's about who is coming to town, when are they coming, and I'm on board with Rebecca. My strategy would also be to go as loose on the minimum length of stay as possible, because it's all about those search results. The cities won't completely sell out. In a lot of markets, there is always more supply than the demand will be there, because if the stadium is full, there will be some fringe events, but then that's it. So it's about making sure you show up as much in search. So what I would do as well is to get as low in minimum length of stay, but as high in ADR. Of course, cancellation policy has to match it, but that's more a risk reward game.
Awesome. Thank you, Bart-Jan. Really good points there, especially thinking about how these people are paying, or who has the money to pay, right? And that does tie into what Kyle mentioned too. If you've got games from African countries and they can't even travel here, you need to really adjust what kind of price premium you're going to be expecting, right? For that game. Now, something that I think is really I want to dig into a little bit more is specifically like, who is that customer? We've mentioned a little bit international this, but like, if we go around and talk about who are the customer groups that you think are going to be relevant, you can tie this to the cities that you're working in. Obviously, it's going to be different for cities, so feel free to kind of take that. But who are these customer groups that we can target? And what are some things about targeting them that you think are going to be important? Randy mentioned a really good one in the chat too, which is not just targeting attendees, but targeting staff is a very interesting strategy. I think that ties into what you guys are talking about with, potentially, people who need to stay a little longer, like before and after a game, maybe not for multiple games because they got to go somewhere else. But who are these kind of guests profiles? and what are the strategies that you think are going to work best for them? And then at the very end, what one do you think you want to target? And why don't we start with you, Bartjan? We'll go back around since I waited for you to be last.
Yeah, definitely. I think to target the staff, that's something definitely possible, but I would only do it if your team or your organization has actually the bandwidth, because of course every team has one staff. The amount of staff is quite limited, so you have to be of a decent size to be able to accommodate them. And regarding who is the traveler, it's football fans, and they take on all different kinds and forms. It's people with their parents, it's families, it's the typical bachelorettes. So you should expect all sizes. But as a European, you will not go alone to the US to watch a game. You will go with a bunch of friends, and you will make it. It will be a remarkable trip. So you should, for further travel, like European travel, Asian travel, you should expect larger groups. Maybe in the US, it may be more condensed because they have an opportunity to go to a game. But as a European, it's something you do. It's a remarkable memory you make with your friends, with your family, with whoever is beloved.
That's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about that too much. Just to kind of pile on that one, what do you need to do to really like position yourself well to capture those guests? And also, how do you make your product friendly to those people? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, Bartjan?
That's a very good question. The answer is twofold. So, first, on a service offering or on a value offering, it's trying to pick a niche. Let's say it's bigger groups of friends, 4+ friends, the bigger homes, and it's accommodating them to what's needed. Dutch people, I have heard someone say in a podcast, like their bicycles. I wouldn't go and buy bicycles to be able to accommodate the Dutch, but it's about knowing who is coming. Like if you have if you know, like if there is a group of 6 friends coming, then okay, then they will want some games. They will want to play some ping pong, some billiards. So it's about what extra can you offer, so they are going to spend the money with you. And it's of course looking at your operations, what can you do, and then looking there, because it's very likely that they will spend some time at the rental. They will go to the game, and the day prior to the day after, they are going to spend some time, and then probably head off to the next city, the next event they're going to. So it's targeting to that market. If you have 1 bedroom, okay, then there is no point on putting a billiard table or a ping pong table there. But if you have a home or if you have a rental, that's accommodating to larger groups. It's about giving that offering. How can you stand out more? For me, that comes back to search results. It's making sure you pop up as much in search results as possible. An easy way to do it as a revenue manager without having to go through your distribution team is your minimum length of stay, keeping it as flexible as possible. But if you have a distribution team that can actually do that, it can be as simple as adding your proximity to the World Cup stadium. Just adding that, because if people start their search journey, people search Airbnb, World Cup, Atlanta, 6 people, and then they start from there.
That's a good point. Really making sure that that is tied in. I have wondered, and I don't know that you'd have an answer for this yet, but like even just, putting in the description that in the language of the games that are coming, that you welcome them, like little tidbits to make people know, if you got a Japanese game coming, make sure you have an ice maker.
Definitely, because I wouldn't put that you have a rice maker, but there are 2 things when it comes to search. First, it's getting them on your listing, and that could be with your title, with something on your image. But the second thing, it's about converting them. And this is a longer trip for a lot of people. It's a trip that they will travel 24 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours to come to. So they will take a longer time on actually booking a listing. They will not be the typical 1 bedroom rental that converts in some seconds. It will be a booking deciding process of multiple steps. Multiple friends have to tap in. They all have to have their opinions. So it's providing as much welcoming aspects for the World Cup. Maybe mentioning, hey, or TV or via this streaming service, you can watch all the other games. As a football fan, that would convert. That would convince me.
Smart, smart. Awesome. Well, Henry, what are you thinking about in terms of the guest profiles that are going to be coming and what you think would be the most beneficial for you to target?
Yeah, I mean, just like one thing would be like for my markets is just anyone can do this too, is just literally using ChatGPT and looking up the economies of those markets and seeing how they're doing travel wise. Another one I just thought of too is I'm sure you could probably find out like fan base size too. There's probably tons of data on that. So kind of just figuring out where you can kind of, push rates versus maybe where you might want to be a little bit more conservative given like the economies that are traveling there. But then also like for Canada, if it's a Canada game, that's where you're definitely going to be maximizing those shorter length of stays with the higher ADRs for sure. But yeah, just looking at like what's going on in the world, like if people have like like more spending power here, if they're inelastic to demand, especially with this, depending on how they're coming for Canada. Within Canada, I'm sure it's going to be like, like last minute if there's vacancy or if there's open tickets, people that are soccer fans, but maybe not necessarily, uh, like a certain team, a fan of a certain team, they might just want to go to experience it. So it is interesting. There's going to be a lot of different layers to kind of like booking behavior with this. But it definitely no segmenting out your guests is definitely is along with segmenting out your portfolio, like Rebecca was saying, like those huge large homes, there's scarcity among those, and if you're getting booked up already, like they're only going to keep getting more and more booked up, less and less available, and I'm sure there's going to be people a month out with a lot of dollars to spend that are like, we're not going to else than a 6 bedroom mansion kind of thing, and they'll pay a pretty penny for those. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of layers, and it's just gonna be like cutting it up, kind of what you expect, and then as we see pace and everything, and what's getting booked, what's not, what like percentage of like the dollar amount amongst the average is getting booked, it'll be very telling as we like move forward. It's almost like we don't know what's gonna happen, but as we start seeing some movement, like every week, we're gonna get like a little bit of more of a sign of kind of how it's gonna turn out. Obviously, we can't forecast the future perfectly, but being a little bit more conservative, I feel like not trying to like shoot for those super high rates. I know people that are like, I want $10,000 a night. It's like, okay, this is a 2 bedroom. Like I'm looking at like the market right now, and I don't see anyone asking that, let alone getting booked. So it's interesting. It's a big communication piece too to key stakeholders. But yeah, I'll pass it off.
We've talked a lot about international, and this is kind of for everyone, but like what piece of the pie do you think the international is, and how do you think the domestic demand is going to be? And how do you think the domestic's going to travel? And I guess last piece, you touch on any of these, how do you think it's going to be different by city in this cohort, right? Like, because obviously, like, do we expect Americans to travel to Mexico? Do we expect people in Seattle? Who's going to travel to Seattle versus who's going to travel to Houston? Do you guys, anyone want to chime in with any thoughts on like how you guys are thinking about that piece of the pie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it, Rebecca.
No, well, I think one of the big things that I've been trying to analyze, and I don't know how you like figure out data, but in my head, like I have a story that's being told, is anyone that's flying in may or may not have an international driver's license or drive. A lot of Europeans use public transport. So they're going to be, God help them, relying on US public transport. It's better in some cities than others. If you're down here in Gulf Shores, we don't have public transport. So that's not a thing. But I think where those type of travelers are going to want to get as close to the stadiums as possible. They're or close to bus stops, L's, any type of that. I think for the US travelers that are driving to these areas may stay 10 minutes outside of the city because they know it's half the price to not be in downtown right by the stadium. They might want to Uber in or, whatever, still take the bus. But I think that there is that could play into the difference between people flying into these places. Are they going to rent cars? I don't know. I haven't really looked at that data. I've seen some stuff from flight, but I haven't seen the rental car data. I don't know who has that, how you even look at that. I think that could very well play a role into kind of that spread out demand because some of these locations are not necessarily in that specific city. Like Miami, the stadium's not in downtown Miami. It's if you don't know that and you're staying downtown, you're gonna have a rude awakening when you book your place downtown Miami and think you're gonna walk to the stadium. Like, so I think there is a lot of that. And so just kind of going back with what everyone was saying, I think it's taking the time right now to put yourself in the guest perspective on your listing descriptions and headlines and stuff and being really clear on your headlines, like walkable, not walkable, 15-minute drive, like Uber, taxi, trolley, whatever you have to get them down there. I think we have to remember put ourselves in the guest position. They don't know. And a lot of them are booking on OTAs. And if you try to use an OTA map to find out where a location is in comparison to where you want to be, it's not easy. Like, it's not easy to kind of figure it out. And, you kind of get that blue circle of death that's just kind of like, oh, you're in this 10-mile, radius. That's being very sarcastic, but, I think it's just not trying to be off topic to what you're asking, but I think it's just really looking at kind of what the guest would be seeing.
Yeah. You made me think that like if you have own a parking spot near the location that you could probably just put that on Airbnb. Like that
Possibly.
for more than the accommodations is a parking spot near the stadium. Tell your
Definitely.
owners.
Yeah.
Um,
Bad idea.
anyone else want to chime in on that before I come back to Kyle and Rebecca on segmentation?
Yep. I think to jump to your question of will it be different for international traveler whether it's Houston or Seattle? As a European, it won't, or for Europeans, it won't. It will just be a travel to the US, and whether
Hmm.
that's Seattle or Houston, not to be rude, but for a European, that's quite the same, and we will figure it out once we're there.
Thank you.
So it's if we prolong that a bit to like the holistic vision, I think the most important thing will also to be where is the demand coming from, which OTA, because we have been talking about Airbnb, but Booking.com, they are sponsoring this event hugely. They will be a big winner of this event. Europeans will book on Booking.com. They have their loyalty programs on Booking.com. They will make the stay on Booking.com. So it's not only making sure that your Airbnb is perfect, which is super important, but make sure that your cross OTA is there, because after or from the moment the tickets are really sold, then people will be start looking everywhere. So if you have those random channel that you haven't touched in like 5 years, still providing your inventory, please have a look at it, because
Hmm.
these travelers will find everything, because for them, this is, especially for European travelers, this is a super remarkable memory, and they will do everything to make the memory as remarkable as possible. And if that requires them to book on some affiliate website at $100 cheaper, they might do it.
That's a great point, especially for I think US property managers just remembering that booking isn't as strong in our space here, but it is the largest international Priceline Group is the largest international OTA group out there. And Priceline owns Booking. And so if you are not on Booking or not optimized on Booking or don't care about it, but planning to target these customers that are coming internationally, you need to think about that distribution strategy because that's going to be potentially the first place they're going to look.
Mhm.
And
Um,
it's sorry to interrupt, but it's not only Booking; it's also Agoda. So Agoda is the platform of choice for Asian travelers, also owned by Priceline. They have a shared inventory, so if you push to Agoda, a lot of those will actually push it to Booking and vice versa. It's not in all markets yet, but I would assume Booking.com accelerating that efforts, especially for the World Cup.
Mhm.
yeah, awesome. Well, Kyle, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of customer segmentation going back, and feel free to comment on anything else. That's
Yeah, no, I'm glad Barjan brought up the whole OTA situation. Definitely Airbnb placement is the one that I'm focusing on. Airbnb is the one that on the actual city landing pages on the FIFA website, they have a map with properties showing right there. So you will get that massive international exposure through Airbnb, which those of us with their high fees don't really like, but that is honestly, it's a popular booking website, and having really good placement, making sure that you are getting positive guest reviews on that network is going to be super important for the lead up to the game. I also think really one of the things, geography that I've seen, just kind of online and also just the booking patterns I'm looking at, there does seem to be a real strong prevalence of West Coast versus East Coast games. Specifically with the West Coast games, seem to be at least initially underperforming in terms of bookings. I think a lot of that's kind of expected. We've talked a good amount about the fact that these games are going to draw in a lot of international travelers. I don't think we can harp on that enough. The MLS has done a lot to build up knowledge of soccer in the United States, but this truly is a massive international event that just doesn't have the prestige within the US that it should have, and it hopefully will have in another 25 years. So right now, FIFA definitely with the high ticket prices is gambling that the MLS has done an excellent job drumming up support for football and that those fans do exist and we're going to find them for the first time. But I do expect that the majority of early reservations are going to be international guests, and that's why really the places where the games that matter to international guests are going to be more important. So specifically, East Coast locations have a lot more knockout games, so the games that actually matter to fans of the sport. They're going to want to go there because they're less worried about what specific team is going to play that. They know an important team could be a Cinderella team coming up through the ranks, or it could be a powerhouse team that always makes it to that level. So East Coast has an advantage there. Rebecca, we've talked about East Coast. You guys have the final. I think that's important. For me specifically, I'm focusing on homes in Miami. I've got the bronze, which is less important, but again, for true fans of the sport, that's a really important game to have. So I think that's going to be key, and I do think what's going to happen is after this next round of ticket buying is when we'll start seeing much more of our domestic U.S. people who don't want to miss out, or maybe they're hoping that they'll just be near the stadium and get a last minute ticket sort of vibes. But I do think this is a wildly international event, and Barjan, I'm glad that you brought up like I don't think we're going to see tons of concern about mass transit. I think definitely people know the United States is a much bigger country than other places that they're coming from, especially within the EU. And they expect that they're going to be renting a car, and hopefully they've probably got that rented first before they've actually gotten their house. So yeah, that's kind of the main stuff off the top of my head. Again, I know we've talked about length of stay a lot, but I really do think that that longer length of stay is going to be kind of the key. Like not going for just 3x on one night, but specifically going for like a 50% increase across 4 or 5 nights. It's going to be much better. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about like because there are some markets, host markets that do have pretty strong local clubs. How do you
Mhm.
think the locals are going to book? Like, when do you think that's going to come in? How would you target them when that does come in?
I think for them, it's going to be specifically within that 60 to 90 day window. It's going to be at the point where they're not expecting to buy a ticket, but they're realizing they're going to want to get pretty messy when they come into town, if we want to put it politely. And that's the types of groups that it's going to be. Or maybe one of them already has a ticket and was going to stay at a friend's house and they decide to move into the city for the game. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of our localized draw. Specifically with LA, I've actually been seeing draw pretty far out. I've got homes in Newport Beach that are booking pretty great rates, and they're not at all near the stadium. That really does show me that there is advanced demand just to be kind of within the nexus of the event, the just the overall joie de vivre of it. So.
Yeah, there's kind of an inverse to that someone brought up to me at Darm that I thought was kind of interesting is they were wondering if there might be, and this is for the markets like we're talking about the markets where there is an event, but what about
Mhm.
the markets nearby where people like, do you think there will be overflow, not from people coming to the events, but people getting out of the cities?
I,
You know what I mean?
I, I that's where my eclipse brain comes in, and I want to say no because there really isn't a reason to especially travel. We're going back to short-term vacation rentals. You have to travel to get there. There has to be a reason, and those people have just as much of an incentive to stay in their hometowns. There is a little British pub where they probably can go see the games. So I don't anticipate like for example like Seattle. I don't anticipate that like Tacoma is going to see a pickup in games just because it is south of the same distance south of the airport as it is north.
Hmm.
I really don't anticipate that. I think that's going to be a town where you might see some small gains just from advanced days, but that could also just be normal guests who are just booking a little bit further out. So.
I guess what I mean, and this is a little bit more, not that people will travel farther away to go into the game, but that people who are residents will, like, will we see markets like, say, the San Juans.
Mhm.
Like locals take vacations to get out of the city during World Cup. Like I know I grew up in Seattle. I don't want to be there when there's an extra 200,000 people.
Yeah. I think the main thing you're forgetting is how they're going to watch the games. We know that every property cable package can be different. So it is the sort of thing where, like, if this is something that you absolutely are interested in, you're not going to risk it by going to a place with a TV you've never touched. So that's at least my general assumption. But it could be a factor. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it depends. A
Um,
lot of people probably won't watch the games in the United States. Not everyone's a fan yet.
Yeah.
Maybe from my side to hop in. So I have been to a European Championship 2 years ago, and what happens a lot is they have like this fan villages for people who cannot go to a game, or like every Dutch person who doesn't have a ticket but happens to be in town because they maybe go to the next game, they cluster all together and they go there. So it's important to that there will also be a lot of fringe events of people who want to watch the game together, because it's a social gathering. People will come together. It's like watching the Super Bowl. They come together to watch the game because this is for them again a memory. However, Kyle, to your point, I do believe there will be some overflow demand to other cities, because if you look at the chances of getting 3 tickets in a row, that's very low. Of course, 2 tickets in a row is also low, but people will have, for example, have their first ticket and then only have tickets for one of the knockout stages that may be within their team. So they will have to have something to do within those times. Some Europeans may argue, okay, let's go and visit some cool landmark or whatever you guys have in the US. But that could be also something that people will do because they are in the country. They may have other things planned, but there might be a delay between both because they couldn't get tickets to an
Mhm.
appropriate game.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
would,
what
No,
I'm looking at.
that's an interesting theory. Like, I definitely like the idea of, like, when they're here, they maybe have like a 30-day window on their flight, here and return back home. So there could be some possibility. I have a hard time imagining that the secondary locations they would potentially choose would be premium ADR locations. Like,
Yeah.
in my mind, that's going to be like, well, I'm here on a budget. Where else can we see in this big, beautiful country? And that's going to be like, oh, well, let's go ahead and book, Sky Coma or something away. Or unfortunately, a town that just recently got hit by floods. But, like, off the top of my head, just thinking of like other vacation rental towns, I don't think they're going to get as much of a premium ADR outside of the fact that it's just going to be June and July rates, which are premium across most of the United States. So I think you're right, there will be some sort of gain. I just don't think it'll be above normal gain just because of a higher, kind of population density at this time.
yeah,
Yeah, I would definitely not plan for it, but I think it'll be
Yes.
interesting in hindsight to see if some of these destinations fill up either from, international demand kind of just exploring or from locals getting out of the city and kind of like but it's again something I wouldn't plan for if you're in one of those markets.
Mhm.
Um, Rebecca, do you want me to ask the same question or do we want to switch up a little bit for the last 10 minutes?
Sure, we can switch up.
Okay. Well, this question is going to be kind of general and we'll go around, but we've talked a lot about the group stage. We have a lot of information on that, knowing where people are coming from. How are you guys going to go about approaching the quarterfinals, semifinals, finals? And obviously that applies to less and less people as there's less and less markets involved. But how are you guys thinking about that? Kind of
No,
going forward?
great
Or how
question.
would you think about it if you don't have a market?
So, what I've really been looking at and kind of studying to see if there is correlation is the supply count. Because, like you see right now, Kansas City is one of the strongest occupancy levels that I've seen so far that's booked. And that kind of makes me go, why? What is going on in Kansas City? Yes, is it the team? But I think it is has to do with those nights. There's not as many hotels, short-term rentals as there are in Atlanta, in Miami, in New York. Like there is some correlation there. So I think that knowing your market, like what you are up against, is huge. I think it's knowing kind of where your placement is if things are booking up. If I was in Kansas right now, and I'm talking to some people over there, they've got a lot of initiatives that they're doing for people that don't normally, rent their house out. So people are renting their house and then, going to leave for those 3 weeks. Like I think there is a little bit of that kind of going on. Everyone kind of gets that. We saw that in Scottsdale, like, every for the Super Bowl a few years ago, everyone just wanted to rent their place out. Um, do I think that's going to happen in all these cities? No. But I think it's really keeping your finger on the pulse because this is a long event and we could get it really exhausted in kind of what's happening. But I think you have to kind of keep your eye on the ball. I think it's also going to give us a little bit of a now, granted, I know it's completely different, but it is a longer event when the Olympics come to LA. I think it's
Mm,
going to give us
very good
some
point.
insight into that. Like
Mm.
those events are spread throughout California. They are going to be bringing international travelers, are they? So I think there's a lot to learn right now, for this, and then a summer Olympics. You're talking a way bigger crowd
Mhm.
than just the World Cup. So I think for me, it's really kind of diving in, geeking out over the numbers and the data, what worked, what didn't, what would I do differently, um, how can we kind of best set ourselves up for that, and then looking at it, in different time increments. I think as revenue managers, where a lot of times the here and now becomes really important, but being able to have a set points where we look back and go, okay, this is what we were looking at on December 18th. This is what I saw on February 25th. Like this kind of series of events, so that we can learn. And even though this is a longer event, it still mimics similar properties, similar things that we see in other event pricing. Other, so I mean, you've learned some best practices that you kind of put into effect. And so I think that's really what I've been kind of focusing on, what has worked in the past, what didn't, and being able to hopefully apply that through these different markets.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. I'll kind of leave it open. We've got 7 minutes. Anyone want to jump in on what they're thinking about for the finals, quarterfinals, post group?
Yeah, I was gonna say that yeah, it is almost similar to like that Super Bowl situation, but yeah, I don't think as many people are gonna be putting their houses on the market, but everything with those final games is gonna be location,
Yeah.
like elasticity and everything, like location, location, location. So being cautious up front if you're really close to it. Because once people find out who's playing in those games, then yeah, you're gonna see like an influx in those closer more centralized located listings are probably going to be the ones that are going to have the highest demand. So if there you have listings that are a little bit out of the way, maybe be a little bit more conservative unless you think that the market's going to go 100% occupied, which statistically is very difficult. You might want to just not try to push ADR as much as possible and be happy with a little bit of like base business on the books just further out. But it will be interesting to see. Like it's gonna be a game of cat and mouse a little bit, but location, location, location. Can't nail that one enough.
I think that's a great point. If you have a differentiating location or a differentiating product, then because like when people find out who's playing, there's a very short window. And if everyone is holding rates high and there's a lot of vacancy and you have to guess the rate, people are going to go vacant. So determining
Mhm.
whether you want to book it in advance for people who are just going, or you're trying to hold out for that very high risk, high reward, like my team's playing, I'm going there, I'm going to do that, is a
Mhm.
really important decision. And it really does tie into your property, right? If you have a mansion right next to the stadium, then you can do whatever you want. But if
Yeah.
you've got a one bedroom apartment that's decorated from Amazon Basics, you probably want to sell that on January 11th.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, I completely agree. It does really come down to supply. And I think that's also why we're seeing a lot of like lower pickup on the West Coast versus Rebecca, as you brought up, Kansas City just blowing up. I think towns like that where historically Airbnbs, Boston is doing really well. I mean, but that's a heavily regulated market with not a ton of supply within our specific industry. They have hotel supply, which is going to do great when it comes to those last minute stays. And people know I can use my Marriott rewards and book right away because my favorite team is coming to that town next because they won back in LA. So I do think for us on the vacation rental sphere, we do have to get further out ahead. I love that you brought that angle up. Like we got to make sure we get our reservations there. But then Henry, what you're talking about for those last games, we can hold for a long time. Like especially going back to the final, the bronze final, the kickout stages and the quarterfinals. Those are going to be valuable because the demand is going to be centralized. Right now, we're seeing a decentralized demand where it's spread out across the entire country, and people are having to kind of pick and choose out of a plethora of options. Once the teams start getting whittling down, you're going to have the fan base actually not even really reducing because you're going to have people who their team got knocked out by somebody else, but they're really excited to see that team go play elsewhere. So, I've as a fan of the World Cup, I've definitely had many years where it's like I start off rooting for one team, and then by the end of the whole series, I've been cheering for four or five across it. So I do think we're going to get those emotional travelers who are like, screw it, we're going, let's book the ticket, and I think we'll get excellent last minute rates. But if it is a town with like high supply, you've got to make sure you already had your reservation on the books. So
Yeah. I do think it's what you mentioned about the long-term stays, I think is really a fascinating question here for these later games. If people are
mhm,
like planning ahead, they're like, I don't really care, I'm going to go see a game.
mhm,
They are probably going to be the people who stay and stick around for a little while too, also. So if you're selling now, if you have a product where you're like, I do need to sell that early, not wait till the last minute,
mhm.
really making sure you are positioned to have a good value proposition on a longer stay is really interesting
Yeah.
because those people will probably not jumping around, especially the later we get in the tournament.
Hmm.
Um, Bart-Jan, why don't you finish us out with your thoughts on anything, really?
On
Anything
anything.
you want, let us know.
So if I look at the final, who's going to play the final? That's Belgium. That's how I look at anything. No, but I think to summarize, it's as it has been said before. There are actually two events happening. One being the group stage, one being everything knockouts, and the knockout will be super unpredictable.
Yeah.
There will be it's impossible to grasp, and we can make probably there is a smart person in this world who can do some calculation of the probability that demand for this city based on these games will will be high, but a World Cup game will be so it's very hard to predict. I remember Germany once losing against South Korea. I could
Mhm.
never have imagined it. I remember this game to this day. But World Cup, it's always so unpredictable. It's a lot all these different variables coming in place. So the knockouts demand is impossible really to forecast. However, what is something to know, and all the revenue managers they will also try to find some kind of anchoring to previous World Cups. This is the first World Cup with 48 teams, which again also creates on total levels more total demand than any other World Cup. But it's the World Cup. Qatar sold out in what was it, 72 hours, and I don't think there's a lot of Qatari football teams, but demand will be there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, really appreciate you guys having this conversation. Obviously, for anyone listening, you can tell there's more questions than answers right now, but you can start to hopefully get some ideas of what these people, revenue managers, are thinking about when they're kind of setting their strategy. And appreciate your guys' time. If you want to share this with anyone, it will be up on YouTube. And otherwise, happy holidays.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank
guys.
you guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.